Good afternoon. My name is Tressa Genov, and I'm Director of Programs and Operations at the Atlantic Council Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's Atlantic Council event with Congressman Mark Messmer, who will be discussing the future of the U.S. hypersonic capabilities and how Congress can support the scaling and fielding of these critical technologies. I also want to acknowledge that Congressman Donald Norcross, who was slated to join us this afternoon, was unfortunately stuck on Capitol Hill for important votes. So we look to Representative Messmer and Representative Norcross because they have been some of the most prominent champions for building the U.S. hypersonic capability, launching the Congressional Hypersonics Caucus in July of 2025 with a mission to advance the importance of hypersonic missile technology as a crucial component in America's national security platform. They have also collaborated with the Atlantic Council's bipartisan Hypersonics Capabilities Task Force, which recently published a report offering actionable recommendations on how the Pentagon and Congress can accelerate and prioritize the development of hypersonic capabilities. Congressman Messmer represents Indiana's 8th District. He serves on the House Armed Services Committee and on the subcommittees on readiness and strategic forces. Our moderator this afternoon is Valerie Encina, and she is a congressional and defense industry journalist at Breaking Defense. Our discussion will focus on the view from the Hill on hypersonic capabilities, what obstacles stand in the way of producing and deploying these weapons, and how Congress can help ensure these capabilities reach our warfighters to make a difference on the battlefield. Convenings on topics such as this are integral to the Scowcroft Center's mission of developing sustainable, nonpartisan strategies to address the most important security challenges facing the United States and its allies. The center honors General Brent Scowcroft's legacy of service and embodies his ethos of nonpartisan commitment to the cause of security, support for U.S. leadership in cooperation with allies and partners, and dedication to the mentorship of the next generation of leaders. Housed within the Scowcroft Center, Forward Defense generates ideas and connects stakeholders across the defense ecosystem to promote an enduring military advantage for the United States and its allies and partners. Our work shapes defense strategies, capabilities, and partnerships essential for deterring threats and prevailing in future conflicts. As a reminder, today's conversations are public and on the record. Also, due to a change in scheduling, this event will now conclude just after 4 p.m. Thank you again for joining us today, and now I'd like to turn to Valerie to start today's discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tressa. Congressman, thank you for being here today. I know it's a very busy day on the Hill, so I'm going to go right into questions. Okay. First off, let's talk a little bit about the caucus. Why do you think that hypersonic weapons needed a boost of advocacy on the Hill?
Well, I think, by and large, most of us are very siloed in our committees and committees of jurisdiction. Forming the Hypersonic Caucus or restarting the Hypersonic Caucus, I want to thank former Representative Doug Lamborn, who I think is on your board, for taking lead on that and handing the baton off to me as a new member of the House Armed Services Committee. With the multiple committees of jurisdiction, the subcommittees of jurisdiction, there's no one single group on the Hill that's responsible for that oversight. With many different folks, 8 groups within the DoD, there's not one single service that's in charge of it. So to be able to bring in together our variety of our caucus members, the variety of members of the Committee of Jurisdiction in a bipartisan manner, to be able to make sure we educate our staffs, educate the rest of the folks on the Hill on the need to make sure we could, are diligent with funding and having a good policy that promotes hypersonics. We are behind the 8 ball in deploying hypersonics, and really left that project setting about 20 years ago. The Chinese didn't slow down, the Russians didn't slow down, and so we've got a lot of catching up to do, which we're making great headway, but the need to make sure we are all pulling together, from all of our different committees that touch it, and make sure we have a clearinghouse, kind of one single point to stay focused and committed.
Tell us a little bit about what the caucus has been doing over the past several months. Have you guys gotten any big A's in the big wins in the NDAA this year? And near-term goals, what are you looking to do?
A lot of big wins in the NDAA. I mean, I jotted down a few of the highlights, but I'm sure there's several that I missed within the NDAA. Billions of dollars that we've got targeted for developing and manufacturing the advanced materials, that it's going to take to develop the hypersonics program. $9 million for advanced materials and manufacturing, $25 million for hypersonic RDT&E, $500 million for hypersonic engineering and manufacturing development, $800 million for prototyping hypersonic attack cruise missiles, $10 million for additional MACH-TB testing, which I'm proud to say the folks at Crane's Naval Surface Warfare Center, Crane, have been at the forefront of that MACH-TB testing program from the beginning, and $200 million for advanced components for hypersonic prototypes. So a lot of investment in things that have to be done up front, all big wins in the NDAA, plus some key policy changes within the NDAA that are going to help as well. In Section 804, to allow the DoD to enter a multi-year procurement for low-cost hypersonic strike systems. Section 226, with the assessment of additional permanent test corridors that we need to develop in our country. And Section 1086 that returns tech transfer and foreign disclosure policies, requires recommendations to update the national defense policy accommodation of hypersonics. So a lot of policy wins within the NDAA, a lot of funding priorities, and stack on top of that, with the HR 1 reconciliation bill this summer, $150 billion in additional defense spending. A big chunk of that is going to be committed to hypersonics as well. And within hypersonics, hypersonic attack weapons, attack systems, we've also got to start focusing on hypersonic defense. You really can't do, we know, we've got to be able to deploy that offensive capability, but we've also got to build out and $25 billion in reconciliation for Golden Dome technologies that are going to really integrate the satellite sensors, the ground-based sensors, tie in all the communications between different defense jurisdictions. And I mean, a lot of the hardware we have, but we've got to integrate everything, and you really can't do one without looking at both.
So let's talk a little bit about the threat here. I'd like us to kind of reel back and think about 2021, then Stratcom Commander General Hyten, he came out and he criticized the progress the US was making on hypersonics at that point in time. He said China had done, quote, hundreds of tests over the last 5 years, and the US had done 9 in comparison. So now, 4 years later, how are we doing in terms of meeting the threat?
Well, a lot of that goes into, the MACH-TB program allows more frequency at a lower cost of testing. Purdue and Notre Dame in my state have developed high-speed wind tunnels, Mach 8, Mach 12, Mach 10, wind tunnels to do testing on hypersonic components. It was kind of interesting when I was on my Purdue visit back in September, and talking to the folks at the Mach 8 tunnel, and they talked about having to heat up the gas before they released it to do the testing on the hypersonic components. And they said, I don't know if they were questioning me or just assuming that I would know, but as an engineer, one of only 2 licensed engineers in Congress, I said, well, you have to heat up the gas, because when you release the gas, you get a PV equal nRT, and you get a pressure drop, you get a temperature drop, and you got to make sure you keep the temperatures above, to get the flows that they have to have for laminar flow. And they said, you're the first person we brought in here that ever knew the answer to that question. But Purdue, Notre Dame, really, pushing the game for, low cost, high frequency, testing of components in their wind tunnels. And like I said, continuing to fund additional, MACH-TB programs that are going to get multiple tests at low cost, development of reusable, hypersonic aircraft, all the things we need to do to get more testing done to where, by the time the manufacturing capabilities catch up, we need to have, proofed most of these things before we, and merge all the technology, all the data at the end to be able to make sure we can deploy these systems as fast as possible. because the Chinese have capabilities, the Russians have displayed their capabilities in Ukraine. So we've got a lot of ground to make up, but excited to see and really we've got the Air Force's Arrow system that can be deployed today. It might not have all the capabilities that we need. The Navy with conventional prompt strike is not far away from being able to deploy that, and the Army's ground-based system is ready. And I think we were told by the end of the year we would have those operational and the first ones deployed. Even if they're not everything we need and the quantities that we need, we've got to get them because we've got to make the Chinese sweat a little bit and worry about what we can do.
That's a great segue. So I wanted to ask you about something that the Pentagon's head of research and engineering said recently, Emil Michael. He was talking about how kind of the US's current hypersonic weapons, things like Arrow, they tend to be more exquisite, more high cost, and he talked about how there needs to be a shift to what you had mentioned, these low cost, scaled hypersonic weapons. Do you think that this is the right direction, and how can Congress go about helping to enable that?
Well, I mean, a lot of the low cost deployment is going to be, when industry is geared up and can produce at scale, the cost is going to come down. And there's companies out there that are working diligently at building, missiles that can be deployed in a much more cost-effective manner. I mean, obviously, the first one that you do in any weapon system is going to be, all the development cost. And but even here again, talking to the folks at Purdue when I was visiting them, they've got a 3D lab that can build, some of the components that currently have to be machined by hand that are extremely costly. They can get them done in a fraction of the percent of the time, using 3D printing. So all of those, but we're going to get folks invested, and we're going to get the scale built up when there's commitment, and these multi-year, purchasing contracts are going to help. When there's commitments for the volume of production, then the automation of those systems and will all help bring the cost down. I had a meeting today with one of the manufacturers, and they thought they could get their hypersonic missile cost down in the $2 to $3 million per missile range. And so there's got to be efforts, but when industry capacity knows that the commitments are there from the DoD, from commitment in the NDAA, commitment from defense approps, and when they know the funding is there to build it out, the capacity will be there, but all of the low cost testing, I mean all of that we're doing, pushing the cost down, the frequency up of all of these, are going to help bring the overall cost down to get them in the field. Obviously, they are exquisite, they are unique, but they're building them at the fraction of the pace that we eventually can.
So, budget authority goes a long way into sending that demand signal. But at the end of the day, industry has to be healthy enough to produce these very special pieces of equipment. How do you think the defense industrial base is at this point in terms of being able to scale up for production, and what are you hearing about potential issues or stressors? What do they need?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is going to be availability of workforce. So we need to, when we've got areas where folks are committed to production, we need to make sure that our schools in those areas are working on apprenticeship programs, on career tech education programs to educate the folks on the production line capability. Purdue and IU have both, or Purdue and Notre Dame have both got master's programs in hypersonic missile technology that are going to help field the high tech pipeline that we need. So I mean it's over encompassing, but the demand signals, the funding signals and the stuff that we've got in the NDAA this year are going to be able to help help build out the machinery, the supply chain components that we need. All of those things are for the critical materials that we need. When the demand signals are there, I'm confident the industry is going to respond. And I've talked to several folks that are involved in hypersonic deployment that once they see they've got private equity ready to jump in as well when the demand signals are there, when they see a return on investment, and when the high production orders come from the Pentagon, I'm sure industry is ready to respond.
So, sometimes during a shutdown or in a time where there's a lot of civilian DoD layoffs, things like test infrastructure, ranges, those priorities can kind of go by the wayside. What are you hearing about the health of those, of that infrastructure?
I've not heard directly from anybody in the Pentagon with concerns, from folks that they had, if there was voluntary layoffs or people that were laid off in the shutdown, of getting them back. At least, the folks that I talked to, here again, I use Crane as my reference because they're in my backyard. They never had to lay anybody off during the shutdown. And so, and they were, this time around, they were assured that their folks that were working without getting paid were going to get paid at the end of the, at the end of the runway. And I think that's the biggest concern is folks in some government, agencies were not considered, critical, but I think defense folks were, and even if they work without pay, they didn't. If you're working without pay and you're not going to get paid at the end of the shutdown, then there was concern about losing those people and not getting them back. But I don't think there was a lot of turnover, directly on the folks that are involved on these type of systems.
So I know there's a high level of classification with Golden Dome right now, but I know that everyone here would love to hear more about it. Do hypersonics have a place in Golden Dome? Would you like to see them have a place? And what are you hearing about from the department about that?
We did get an update. I got to just be careful of what I talk about that's considered secret classification, but the leadership in the Pentagon is certain that they're going to be able to deploy, Golden Dome technology. A lot of the components, they feel like the components that they've got are going to be able to pull together well. They've got to integrate a lot of software systems and get things to talk at the ground sensor level, the space sensors, get all the technology, communicating. But they feel confident they're going to be able to deploy Golden Dome. Obviously, you're going to have to, pick what assets you want to protect. We won't be able to protect, 100% of the square footage of the United States, but they'll have to prioritize what defense assets, what population centers. They're going to have to pick, where and how they get deployed, as things build out. But they feel confident they'll be able to get the job done.
Over the past couple of years, there's been sort of an ebb and flow in terms of funding for hypersonics. I think, with the Air Force, we've seen their commitment to something like Aero kind of being questioned at times. Do you see a stronger commitment on hypersonics currently?
A much higher degree of funding in this year's funding bill, and really the commitment to continue to push that out in the 27 budget as well. I think folks across the Pentagon, from the top down, have realized, we are in a bad spot without, being able to heavily deploy, hypersonic. A strong hypersonic presence is a deterrent effect that we currently lack severely. So, get what we've got in the field, even though they're, maybe the higher cost, systems, but we got to continue to press over the next year or two to get everything in the field deployed that we can, because we are currently lacking significantly and to be able to combat China and the things that we can deploy, the things we do have, might not have all the capabilities that we want in the final products that are going to continue to be developed, but we've got to get them. We got to get them in the field. I think we had $353 million in NDAA to get deployed the technologies that we currently have developed and ready.
One of the questions that's getting sent in by folks that are watching asks, how is the Department of War describe the optimum use case for hypersonic weapons? And I think another way to ask that is, for you on the Hill, when you talk to your colleagues, how do you explain, what do you say in terms of an explanation of why this is so important?
Well, it gets you to be able to have a strategic, a weapon that can travel a high distance in a short amount of time. So just as a comparison, our current cruise missiles, it would take an hour to fly 500 miles to hit a target. A hypersonic weapon can strike that target in about 10 minutes or less. And the key to having real strategic advantage of this is to get our submarine-launched hypersonics, which Crane has got a hypersonic submarine-launched test facility that they're going to have. I think by the end of next year, they'll be able to start filling it with water and be able to test the launch of hypersonics from a sub. When we can get the stealth capability of a sub with a hypersonic missile and close those ranges, down from, hundreds or thousands of miles, and really have the ability to target, with that speed and closer ranges, will really give us a high degree of deterrent capability. So, but all of it gets if they have an hour to know something's coming, they can hide an asset, they can plan a counterattack, they can there's things that the enemy has if they have more time on their hands, with a shorter time frame to make that strike with a hypersonic program. It deters your opponent from maybe ever making an aggressive move to start with.
Another question from the audience: how close do you think the U.S. is to actually fielding a hypersonic capability?
Well, we were told by the Pentagon leadership the Army's ground-based system should be operational and deployed at the end of the year. The Aero system could be deployed, immediately. It's just a matter of getting that, deciding which aircraft, how they're going to deploy it. But that technology is ready today. Maybe not with all the flexible, operational characteristics we want, but there's targets that can't move that they could be used against today, and a couple years of for the Aegis deployed conventional prompt strike, probably 3 to 5 years to the submarine launch system is fully built out. But those are all methods of deploying that are in the works, and some are available. I think the Army's ground-based platform, they said by December 31st, they expect it to be ready to go.
These can sometimes be very expensive systems. What questions are you asking as a lawmaker to kind of understand, both with your technical background as an engineer, to understand whether these systems as planned are technically feasible, whether they are the best fit for the threat, and whether the cost is worth it?
Well, the cost effectiveness is going to be really driven by the creativity, by the defense contractors that we have. And a lot of these folks are, not your typical, your classic, major primes. They're folks that are new into the industry, and they're looking at ways to get automation into the production, and whether they're liquid fuel, solid fuel. The creativity that these folks are bringing to the table, and looking at, strictly, looking at it from a cost competitive, standpoint of how inexpensively we can get them built. The more we put these things out in a competitive bid environment where you look to drive, the least cost, and the highest production rates you can get. I think our mid-range defense contractors are going to do an excellent job at delivering a cost-effective, high-volume weapon system.
So we are running out on the end of our time, so I thought I would just cap things off with 2 questions for you. So in a couple of months, we're hopefully going to get an FY27 budget request from the Defense Department. What would you like to see there on hypersonics that would demonstrate a seriousness of intent? And secondly, in 5 years, where would you like us to be in terms of technology?
Well, I expect in 5 years, as long as we keep the funding levels, committed, and from Congress, we'll do our part. And I really feel confident, based on what we've heard from the Pentagon, what we've heard from, our national leadership, that the awareness and the need, to continue to take what we've done this year between reconciliation and the NDAA, and continue to, pick up from here and continue to push it and expand it. when those demand signals are out there, I thoroughly expect industry to respond and really continue to see the Navy sub-launch program. Like I said, if we've got the air launched, ground launched, some of the more cost-effective deployment options, there would be. It would be easily to take those in the ground theater to places, and get them deployed at large scale, in every strategic, whether it's ground-based, air-based, or Navy launch-based. But as long as we continue to fund it, I think industry is going to respond, and everything we've heard from the Pentagon, they realize we've got to continue to press hard.
So FY27, keep funding going. Next 5 years, just field things as planned. Any concerns, any headwinds that you see?
Well, I mean, obviously there could be things around the corner that we don't expect, but I think as long as we continue to work on critical elements, all of the components, the metals, I mean, all of the supply chain, pieces, continue to push for domestic production of those, those rare earth elements and things that we need for missile production. As long as we continue on the path that we are, we should be able to meet that with domestically sourced product.
Great. Congressman, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this, and thank you all for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.